Just for a moment. Good morning, everybody. It's my first visit to Scotland since I was recently in Aberdeen, meeting many senior representatives of the oil and gas industry, and of course, since that time, there's been yet more crushing and unnecessary news for the Scottish and indeed British economy. And later on that day, we were pretty much eve of poll for the Scottish Parliament by-election in Hamilton, in which I think it's fair to say the result we got pretty much stunned everybody, including, to some extent, myself. Ross was a great candidate, but we did, I think, in a very short space of time, with relatively limited resources, achieve a remarkable result. And we are, as a party, getting ready for the Scottish Parliament elections next year. We've just had a very big weekend with 200 potential candidates who've come forward, who are going through interviews, who are going through vetting, and we will be taking those elections next year very seriously indeed. And I think our opponents might take us quite seriously as well. Now, you might have noticed that yesterday I did a little press conference at Oxford Airport, which seems to have attracted quite a bit of attention, and is now, it seems to be bringing quite a degree of division within the Labour government itself. Firstly, Jack Straw, who was the Home Secretary at a time when we did face a problem with illegal immigration. In those days, it was people basically coming in the backs of lorries. Jack Straw saying we should effectively disapply ECHR. And interestingly, this morning, of all people, Jack Straw, who was one of the architects of the Human Rights Act in 1998, now saying it was never intended to be used in the way that it currently is by British judges. So I do think what we did yesterday was to spark a much bigger national debate about how we end illegal immigration, how we control our borders. I know this has not been a particularly massive topic in Scottish politics. I'm not here to dwell on that issue today, but I have a sense that maybe it will become a bigger debate in Scottish politics, given that Glasgow now is the asylum capital of the United Kingdom, with nearly 4,000 people who came to Britain illegally housed in Glasgow. That's 50% more than the next highest place in the United Kingdom, which is Birmingham. 50% more. And I would have thought that if you were a family on the social housing waiting list in Glasgow, you might be beginning to think this is something that perhaps ought to be discussed. And accordingly, we have seen a rise in certain types of crime in Glasgow over the last couple of years, coinciding with the placement of thousands of young, undocumented males from cultures in which women aren't even second-class citizens. So I think that will be more of a debate in Scotland as time goes on. But the intention of today's press conference is, and it's part of showing you how seriously we are taking the Scottish Parliament elections. It's for me to introduce Graham Simpson, MSP. He's been in the Parliament since 2017 for Central Scotland. He, of course, has been a Conservative, but I understand, Graham, that may be about to change. So please, it's all yours.
Well, thanks very much, Nigel. Last night I was asked to send Nigel's team my CV, or a bit of a biog. What I left out of that was that I'm a member of the cross-party group on beer and pubs, and I thought you'd like that, and we often do visit breweries and pubs, mainly in the Edinburgh area. So I know you perhaps didn't have a good experience in an Edinburgh pub a few years ago, but maybe we can maybe we can change that at some point, Nigel. Now, it's fair to say that some of you won't be surprised to see me here, given that the Scottish Tories have been touting my name as a potential defector for months now. So today I'm giving them what they want, but perhaps not for the reasons that they think. Leaving the party that I first joined when I was 15 is an enormous wrench, and I've been through a lot of soul searching in the past few weeks. I've written to Russell Finlay, resigning from the Scottish Conservatives, but frankly, the letter is not worth sharing, because besides saying that I'm off, the only other thing it says is to wish him all the best for the future, and I mean that on a personal level. When Murdo Fraser first stood for the leadership of the Scottish Conservatives in 2011, he did so suggesting that we needed a new centre-right party in Scotland, and I agreed at that time with that analysis. But the independence referendum came along, and all such talk went away. The referendum was a gift to the Tories, and with that, and with the threat of such upheaval gone, I think their electoral hopes are diminishing fast. To be honest, and I think you all know this, the constitutional battle has got in the way of good government and good opposition here. We have neither. But with a new kid on the block, Reform, the kind of centre-right party envisaged all those years ago, we can at least have one of those. Now, I've been thinking about my future for some time. I decided a few months ago that I would not be standing for the Scottish Conservatives again, and others have taken the same decision. I told the party that at the end of May, but with the Hamilton by-election looming, where Ross did very, very well, I promised not to say anything. I've not stuck out a press release or said anything on social media. I honestly thought the most likely scenario for me would be to move on to the next stage of my life and find a job in one of the sectors that really interest me, such as housing or transport. And although finding a job may not have been easy, I think I have enough respect out there to have got something that would have excited me. But I've watched Reform with interest, and I see the opportunity to help to create something fresh here in Scotland. And it's clear that the voters agree in increasing numbers. But just because a party is becoming popular isn't a reason to join it. Keeping your job in Parliament isn't a good enough reason either. I've only reached the decision that I have in the past few weeks, and I mean over the summer, and it's not been easy. It really has not been easy. I first joined the Conservatives when I was at school, just before Mrs. Thatcher came to power. I left politics for a career in journalism, but then rejoined and have been a councillor and an MSP. So I'm really very fortunate. I know what a Conservative is, and I actually wrote about it last year, just to remind some people. The election next year here in Scotland is going to see a very different Parliament from the one we have now, which is stale and very often uninspiring. Too many people feel let down and ignored. They feel the system is against them, that the traditional parties don't even care about them. Save for some fine individual MSPs across parties, the political class is not serving the people well. Failure is accepted and change takes far too long. And I'll give you a couple of examples personally of that. Thousands of people living in tenements often face real difficulties when it comes to maintaining their buildings. In the last session of Parliament, March 2018 to be exact, a group of MSPs from across the divide formed a working group to see how we could address the challenges, and we came up with some proposals. But it will be the next Parliament until we see any legislative change, so probably at least 10 years since we first started looking at this. The second example of how slow things can be has been the progress of my Members' Bill, which would see a system of recall introduced into the Scottish Parliament. I first mooted this at the end of the last session of Parliament and started work on it at the beginning of this session. It's badly needed to restore some trust, but we've not even had the stage one debate. It might get over the line before Parliament dissolves at the end of March, and I really hope that my move today does not jeopardise that, as it's far too important for people to play silly games with. This isn't the kind of bitter speech that you might have been expecting, is it? I haven't criticised the Scottish Conservatives or Russell Finlay. For me, politics is about what you can do for people and not yourself. And I've demonstrated that in my 10 years as a councillor in the Conservative bastion of East Kilbride, and since being elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2016. One very recent example was my successful campaign to have the companions of people with sight difficulties allowed free rail travel. That didn't get a lot of publicity, but that's a really positive thing, and it helps a lot of people. I've joined Reform because we have the chance to create something new, exciting and lasting that puts the needs of people over the system, that asks what is going wrong and how we can fix it. The SNP was first elected to power in 2007, so next year will mark 19 years of failure in health, education and transport. Somehow we need to remove them from office, and Reform can help to do that. Scotland needs fresh thinking, new ideas, and I hope to be at the heart of helping Reform shape that offer to the people next year with policies drawn up in Scotland, for Scotland, and designed to fix the mess that we're in. And that's why I'm joining now and not later. I've no doubt that initially my announcement today will spark anger, disappointment, and probably some sheer nastiness. I don't like that aspect of politics, and I'm not looking forward to it. But there are many ex-colleagues who will also understand. And I say to those who have great ideas for Scotland and who may have felt ignored to talk to me. You will find my door, wherever I am put in Parliament next week, open and receptive to the kind of fresh thinking that we need in politics. And over the next few days and weeks, I'll have more to say on what we need to do to fix the mess that the SNP has made and how Reform can help to do that. Thank you.
Very good. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good.
Welcome. Brilliant.
Good.
Graham, thank you very much indeed. And now I didn't know you were part of the pub and beer group. For those that don't remember the story, I came up to Edinburgh in 2013 to challenge the idea that how could you have independence in Scotland if you wanted to remain part of the European Union? That was the purpose of my visit, only to be surrounded by a very, very angry mob, nationalist mob, really angry, all with very wide pupils. I could never work out why that was. And the police locked me into an Edinburgh pub for my own safety. There were a couple of old lags in the corner said it's the most exciting thing that's happened here for 30 years. But I have to say the reception I've had in Scotland more recently has been much more positive than it was back in 2013. And why Graham matters to us, of course, because he's our first MSP, but because he's deeply experienced in the fields of journalism and politics, and I believe he's going to help us significantly in getting our policy platform right for those elections next May. And he's joining us now because he's prepared to put in the hard yards. And it will be important for us, however many of our number go into the Scottish Parliament, to have some people there who can show us the ropes. Otherwise, we'll turn up and just not know what to do. So we're very, very delighted, Graham, that you've made this decision. And I'm sure if you've been a member of the Tory party for all those years, as you say, you've not taken this decision lightly, but you've done it for positive reasons, not negative ones, and that's great. Now, we have a whole host of questions, beginning with Andrew Kerr from BBC Scotland.
Thank you, Mr Farage. Good morning to you. When Richard Tice was here in March, he spoke about net zero. You've now spoken about immigration. The SNP are accusing you of being the architect of the small boats crisis because of your support for Brexit. When it comes to reform and looking ahead to next year, is your party just a two-trick pony in Scotland? And for Graham Simpson as well, will you resign from the regional list because you were elected as a Tory MSP? Thank you.
Oh, I'm a two-trick pony now, not a one-trick pony. Well, that's progress, isn't it? We must be going in the right direction. For years, I was called a one-trick pony. All he ever talks about is the EU. Well, yes, we do talk about the small boats because there is a sense of outrage amongst a very clear majority of the British public on this issue. Firstly, because it's unfair. You know, I touched very briefly on the social housing list in Glasgow, just as one little example. And secondly, because it does threaten our national security. And I'll word this carefully as we're live, but you know, there have been some recent arrests made on suspicion of terrorism offences. And thirdly, because, frankly, people find it unacceptable that if they have HMOs or they have migrant hotels in their area, there is an increase in certain types of crime. And I'm just going to give you a simple fact, whether you like it or not, but an Afghan national is 22 times more likely to be convicted of rape than a British-born person. This is cultural. It's not racial, it's cultural. And I think that's a very, very strong point to make. And and we're now campaigning, of course, on net zero, very much so. It is a self-inflicted wound. It is something of absolute stupidity that is deindustrialising large parts of the United Kingdom. And look, you know, it'd be marvellous if we didn't need oil or gas, but we do. And we're going to for a very, very long time. So why not produce it ourselves? And of course, Scotland would be the chief beneficiary within the United Kingdom of that. Plus, we've launched a campaign on crime, you might have noticed. We've got Britain's most senior, famous living detective, you know, who's joined us. Colin's joined us, and there have been feature films made about him and books written about him. And we got Vanessa Frake, who's joined us, a very well-known prison governor and regarded as one of the toughest prison governors in the country. And we will be broadening our campaigns and talking about the cost of living crisis. There is a direct link there to energy, I will grant you, because it's one of the main components of the problem. And we'll move on, and we'll talk more broadly about the economy. We'll talk more broadly about the tax system. We'll talk about the fact small businesses have been disincentivised. So, no, we are far from being a two-trick pony. But if the SNP are unhappy with us, I haven't got a problem with that.
And just to build on that, I think one of the tasks that I've got, Andrew, is to develop a policy suite that's not just those two issues, but actually looks at the powers that the Scottish Parliament has and how to address the challenges that Scotland faces. So as I said earlier, I'll be outlining some thoughts very, very soon, not today, not in any detail today, but you'll hear more from me and others on that, so that Reform isn't just seen as a party that just concentrates on two issues. On the question of whether I will resign from the Parliament, I guess you probably know the answer, and the answer is no, I won't be resigning. I think it's a fair question. It's a very fair question. But I won't be. I still have work to do. I've still got this very important members' bill that I want to get through, which I don't see as party political. It isn't. It is about reforming the system in the Scottish Parliament so that we can have a system of recall there. I take that very seriously. As I said earlier, I think one of the risks, one thing I'm really worried about is by going now, will other parties start to play silly games with that piece of legislation? I hope they don't.
OK, thank you. Colin Mackay from STV.
Thank you. Just to clarify, before I ask you a proper question, who's going to lead the party into the election next year, and who's going to take part in the STV leaders debate?
Well, it won't be me.
You're not going to lead you're not going to lead Reform into the Scottish election next year?
I'm not standing for the Scottish Parliament, no.
But you're not going to lead the campaign,
No,
so
no,
you're not going to take part in the debates?
We will, of course, have a leader of our group, you know, who will go in as leader of the group and be a potential, you know, First Minister. So yes, of course. But hey, you know what? As I've explained before, and I did a similar thing when I was in Aberdeen the other day, you know, we are a work in progress. We're growing. We're probably an advanced teenager now. We haven't got to full maturity as a political party. And as I said a moment ago, we had 200 candidates over the weekend being interviewed. We're going to put out what you'll see from us is a list of candidates representing every aspect of life. with broad experience of many, many fields, and from within that number, there will be a leader as we go into the elections.
On the immigration stuff that you were talking
Yep.
about yesterday, you're talking about keeping 24,000 illegal immigrants in MOD bases. Will any of these internment camps be in Scotland? Will any of the flights be from Scotland? And will you have to contend separately with the Scottish court system?
Even though Glasgow is the asylum capital of the UK, numerically, the numbers in Glasgow compared to the northern conurbations in England are actually very, very small. As for which military bases, we're not going to say that now, otherwise government would simply sell them off and probably put solar farms on them or something like that. But no, we are deadly serious about this plan. And I tell you what's really interesting is people aren't questioning the need for something radical to be done. Even the Prime Minister hasn't attacked me on the idea that we should be deporting people that come illegally. But he hasn't got the means to do it. The Tories didn't have the means to do it. We are proposing the means to do it.
Except for the internment camps.
People will be detained and deported, yes, and hopefully they'll be in those camps for a very short period of time. And I do believe that once the message gets to those who are prepared to pay thousands of euros to criminal smuggling gangs, that if you spend that money and come to the UK, you won't ever be allowed to stay. Within 2 weeks, the boats will stop coming, and that will at least stop the inward pressure that's been coming. There are other problems too. I mean, huge other problems too, such as overstayers. If you look at the asylum list for last year, you see the biggest contingent is from Pakistan, and they're people that have flown supposedly to meet family members or come on holiday and just deliberately overstayed and then claimed asylum. So, there are many, many aspects to this. The boats obviously is about 40% of it, and it is the most visible thing. And I would just quickly say that when Tony Abbott put forward similar proposals on Australia in 2012, he was met with the same kind of debate. Can you in practical terms do what you've set out in your general election manifesto? And he stopped the boats. Tony Abbott in Australia proved that with political will, you can stop this scourge. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to go on.
Can I just,
please,
before we move on, just call in on the leadership question, because I think it's a really fair question. What is Reform going to be offering when we come into the final months of the election campaign? Clearly, Reform will need a figurehead so that you can grill them during the STV debate. But I'm not coming in here today as somebody who's been parachuted in to be the Reform leader. That would be entirely wrong. It would be wrong for the members of Reform. So I'm just here as I am, as an MSP.
Yeah, there's no backroom deal.
No, there certainly isn't. But obviously, by the time of the election, we'll need to have someone.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Tony Maguire, GB News.
Thank you. Mr Farage, you said that obviously immigration hasn't been a particularly big deal in Scotland, but over the last few weekends we have seen an increasing number of protests outside migrant hotels. What have you learned over your last few trips to Scotland to help you, I guess, renegotiate your plans for England for Scotland? Is there an understanding there that things have to perhaps be dealt very differently north of the border? And then to Mr Simpson, in terms of John Swinney, who's often talking about reform as dog whistle politics, bringing division to the country, how do you hope to combat him when you take your seat at Holyrood?
Well, clearly there are some areas that need to be dealt with differently, but there is also, a lot of commonality. There hasn't been a great debate about immigration in Scotland because, frankly, none of the parties in Holyrood have wanted to have that debate. So we've not really been having it. You're right. Over the last few weeks, there's a growing awareness of the issue, and I predicted from the podium a few minutes ago that I think that debate will get bigger. Inevitably, it will get bigger. But I think the one thing that Scotland gives England an example of is the sheer stupidity of not aiming to be self-sufficient in energy, because clearly the Scottish economy stands to benefit far more from oil and gas than other regions or other parts of the United Kingdom. And I think it's absolutely tragic and self-defeating and stupid what we're doing to the North Sea. It just makes no sense at all. It is absolutely crazy on every single level. Economic madness. And the argument that wind power makes us less reliant on other sources of energy from around the world just is not true. The national grid is not fit to deal with intermittent renewable energy. And frankly, if you look at what's happened to energy costs with wind, one of the biggest lies we've been told is that it would give us cheaper energy. It does not. And right at the minute, there's another big round being negotiated for wind contracts. We'll find out what the final auction prices are, but there's no good news in it at all.
With regard to how I'll deal with John Swinney, I get on with Mr. Swinney as I get on with most people. He knows me well enough to know that I don't indulge in dog whistle politics, as you describe it. He would have a job making that one stick, but he'll probably try. But I'll take my place in the Parliament next week for First Minister's questions. I'm not sure where I'll sit yet, but it probably won't be with the Conservatives. Although actually there's no rules on that in Parliament. You can sit wherever you want. So maybe I'll decide on the day. I'm sure Mr. Swinney will have some fun, and I'll enjoy listening to his jokes on the day.
Yeah, but he might be surprised how many SNP voters might actually vote for you and vote for our party next year, so I'm sure he will have a go. Yes. Right, let's move on. James Cook, BBC National.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farage. Scotland faces, in common with other parts of the UK, a demographic issue in terms of a shrinking share of the working age population and a falling birth rate. Given that, in a flatlining economy over many years now, doesn't the Scottish economy really need more migration, whether that might be legal migration, but doesn't it need more migrants rather than fewer? And just, if you don't mind, for Mr. Simpson, I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow, I'm so sorry, your logic in terms of staying in Parliament, because I understand that if one is an MP or if one is elected in a constituency, that to a certain degree one has a contract with those voters, and you can say, well, they voted for me. But no one voted for you, did they? They voted for the Conservative Party.
OK. Do you want to go with that first?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I was elected on the Conservative list. That's why I've been uneasy with this decision. I am uneasy with it. But the rules say that you can stay. Now, maybe we should look at the rules, but we've had recently Jamie Green has gone from the Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats, and he has stayed on as an MSP. I think that it's maybe something that the Parliament should look at, but I was actually asked this very question when I appeared before the Standards Committee to talk about my bill, and I was asked, you know, should someone in the position that I'm now in have to stand down? My answer was, well, I don't think they should, because people can leave parties for many, many reasons. You know, you may have been finding life very uncomfortable in your workplace. I'm not in that position. The Conservatives haven't made life uncomfortable for me, but I do think I've got work to do, so I'm sorry if it upsets folk, but I'm staying put.
Yeah, I mean, people leave parties, but equally parties leave people as well. And perhaps as a long-term Conservative, maybe that's how you feel to a certain extent.
Yeah, this has not been an easy decision. No. I'm not pretending otherwise.
No. On falling birth rates, I mean, it's a very fair point. Where are the workers of the future going to come from? One concern on that front is the pace of AI development is such that an awful lot of jobs that exist today are not going to exist in just a few years' time. So we may be in a position where we actually need fewer people in the workplace. But on the subject of skilled migration, I mean, look, you know, if people come into Britain and they've got skills and they integrate and they contribute, then no one's got a problem with that, provided the numbers are at a sensible level. The problem, you know, if we're moving on to legal migration very quickly, is that a Conservative Party that promised net migration of tens of thousands a year gave us net migration of up to nearly 1 million a year. And amazingly, of the last 3 million that came into Britain from outside the European Union, fewer than 20% are in work. So it's actually become a negative Even the argument, look, expanding population, pressure on services, lack of integration, but don't worry, Nigel, because it's an economic benefit, and now it's not an economic benefit, and everybody knows it. So you know, I get the point, but I think the jobs market is going to go through some quite revolutionary change within the next 5 years, and it's something that government's going to need to think about and adapt to. And of course, one of the answers is that while Scotland maintains, or should maintain, its more traditional oil and gas industries, it also needs to think about becoming a hub for the new evolving world of AI and tech, because that's where the future is. And I'm afraid the entirety of the United Kingdom is falling badly behind on this race, to my great regret. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Kezia Buckley from Sky News.
Thank you. You've had a number of defections now across councillors and now obviously in the Scottish Parliament. Are you just becoming the party of the old Tories? And how can you say that you're offering renewal if you're just going to fill the seats up with defectors?
Well, we're not, but what we do need some experience. You can't just send people... I mean, if you look at the county councils in England that we won, you know, where we're doing best is where we've got some people that actually have been on those councils, have been in cabinet, who know the ropes. So we do need some people to help us. I'm absolutely not going to allow this to become the Tory Party 2.0. But and I'm not going to be a vehicle for those just to rescue their careers in Parliament. And I thought, you know, Graham spoke to that point actually quite strongly. Just getting re-elected wouldn't be good enough for him anyway. He's got the ability to do many other things in life. So, you know, we'll be very selective about who comes. And frankly, an awful lot of Conservatives, I mean, really, are probably closer to the Liberal Democrats anyway. So, you know, those that are coming with us are coming because they see it's a positive vision. And those that are coming to us are all ones that if I accept them on the basis they're going to roll their sleeves up and help us with the project. And, by the way, you know, across the country, at council level, we've got former Labour councillors coming to us. We even had a Lib Dem, which did surprise me very much indeed. But, you know, I think one of the interesting things about reform, and one of the interesting about its growth since the general election, is if you have a look at where the votes have come from, and the biggest and most important chunk of votes that's come to us since the general election has come to us from people who did not vote in last year's general election. So it's a really interesting cross-section of people that are coming to us across all ages, and actually, you know, a much more breadth of the political spectrum than perhaps you know, you would naturally assume.
And actually, I would make the point, Kezia, that, you know, when I hopefully stand next year, if I'm selected, and that hasn't happened yet, there is no guarantee that I'll be elected. So I'm going into this with no guarantees of being elected. And I was interested in your description of me as an old Tory. I don't feel that old, but you'll all want to know, but I'm 61, which I know will surprise.
That's a terrible age to be.
Will surprise a lot of you. I don't know whether that's old, Kezia. Older than you.
Same age as me. Oh dear, oh dear, oh,
Oh
dear.
dear.
Never mind, never mind. We can console each other, I think.
Over a pint.
Yeah, well, probably from the sounds of it, yeah. Catherine Sampson from, where's she?
Channel 4 News.
Channel 4 News, great.
That's
Yes,
Channel 4 News. Mr Farage, since you're entering into Scottish politics, have you read Nicola Sturgeon's book?
No, I haven't. I was surprised that it wasn't top of my list, actually, for summer reading. No, I haven't.
She's very complimentary about you. She describes you as someone with a very fragile ego who's not comfortable, particularly around women. Do you and your party have a woman problem? Are you seeking any female candidates in Scotland? And does your promise on securing women's safety ring hollow when this week you've committed to sending women and girls back to countries where they can be raped, tortured and killed?
True. That is actually not true. I was very, very clear yesterday in what I said, that the deportation of illegal immigrants, we were not even discussing women and children at this stage. There were so many illegal males in Britain, and the news reports that said that after my conference yesterday were wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
So women and children will be exempt?
I didn't say exempt forever, but at this stage, that is not part of our plan for the next 5 years. Absolutely. Now, on the broader point, do I have a woman problem? What a question. You might have noticed, or you might not, I don't know. But there's been quite a phenomenon happening within this party over the course of the summer. They've grouped together. They're called Women for Reform, and you will now see them appearing increasingly on national television, in national papers, and there's been a lot of women have joined us over the course of the summer, particularly, and we have a female MP, of course, in Sarah Pochin. We have, a female mayor in Greater Lincolnshire. We have a quite prominent former public prosecutor that's joined us, Lila Cunningham, in London. And I think you'll see at our conference, which begins next Friday, Friday the 5th, I think what you'll see is that Women for Reform is now becoming a very strong force in the party. In fact, it won't be long before I'm completely outnumbered. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go on to Rebecca Alice Brady from LBC.
Thank you, Mr Farage. You say deportation would help keep women and girls safe in the UK. Yet this morning, despite you just saying that your comments weren't about women in the next 5 years, Richard Tice told LBC, and he suggested female asylum seekers should be deported to countries where their safety can't be guaranteed, countries like Sudan, where rape can be used as a war tactic. Are you saying that his comments were wrong?
It won't be happening in the first 5 years of a reform government.
But was he wrong?
It's just not our priority.
Does women's safety only apply to women in the UK for you?
Our primary target is to worry about women and girls on the streets of this country, less than what the countries are like that we're going to deport these men to. It's all about priorities, and it's all about, frankly, given the mess that we've had with this over the last few years, it's all about whose side are you on? Are you on the side of British people and their safety? Firstly, on the streets, but secondly, at a national security level, which I'm very concerned about? Or are you on the side of a series of completely outdated treaties and courts of dubious distinction? OK, let's move on. We've got Craig Megan from PA. The font's so small I can't read it.
Hi, last time you were in Scotland, you suggested scrapping the Barnett formula. Is a vote for reform a vote to cut billions from Holyrood's budget and ultimately make Scots worse off?
No, I just said anything that's been in existence for 60 years needs to be looked at. And wouldn't it be great if the Scottish economy was at a level where Barnett formula funding would be lower than it is today? Wouldn't it be great if there was no need for subventions? Because if that was the case, Scotland would have become much wealthier. Some would even say that Scotland would have been made great again. So that was what I was saying, is the reason we have this is that the Scottish economy is lagging. I mean, there isn't that much to be proud of, frankly, in the rest of the UK economy either. But, we would want, and we will, and I touched on it earlier, but helping the oil and gas industry, helping small business, being pro-business, being pro-investment. And to do that, what you need are some people in politics who've actually run businesses, who actually understand how these things work. And there's been an absolute dearth of that in Scottish politics and in national politics too.
So you can promise Scots you won't cut Holyrood's budget?
I'm not here to slash billions from the Scottish budget, but I am here to try and help a group of people get into Holyrood, into a powerful position next May, who think about things very, very differently.
People who also don't want to slash Holyrood's budget, but want to see Scotland performing better so that we earn more money in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, again, a positive, not a negative. Conor Matchett from Scottish Sun.
Hi, Nigel. You've already referenced the stuff around Glasgow being the asylum seeker capital of the UK. The local council says it needs more help from both the UK and the Scottish governments. What would you do? And in general, how would you describe the situation in Glasgow? And Graham, in March, one of my colleagues asked you if you were defecting to reform. You said, don't be silly. What's changed? And are any of your former colleagues thinking about following your lead? And if you had your pick, who would you choose as reform power?
Right.
Well, it's your chance to damn someone's career.
Right, so I'll tell you that. Yes, I remember that. I said don't be silly because I wasn't thinking about it then. But I have since, and as I said earlier, I've done some deep thinking over the summer, and really in the past few weeks I've arrived at that decision. So, yes, I've been fending off all these rumours about me joining Reform when they were untrue. And if I've told you they're untrue, they were untrue. It's true today because I've clearly joined. I would like former colleagues to consider what I've said. I'm not going to embarrass any of them by naming any of them.
Very good. Were you surprised that he was here today? No. Oh, well, there we are. Well, at least we kept it secret. It didn't leak, did it? I mean, I think we're quite proud of that, you know. The solution to the Glasgow problem, they wouldn't be there if we were in charge. They wouldn't be there. And the very idea that an undocumented young male should be coming into this country, put in a 4-star hotel, given free dental care, medical care, and free to walk the streets when we've no idea who they even are. Absolutely crackers. And by the way, all over the world, if you enter a country illegally, you are banged up and deported. It's what normal countries do. We're asking for this to be a normal country. And it's really, as I said, really interesting to see that Jack Straw is also making that point today. He was there in '98 when the ECHR was incorporated into British law via the Human Rights Act. As he said, this was not the intention. And it is actually very interesting that the last Labour government, the one up until 2010, they were deporting tens of thousands of people a year who'd come illegally. It was considered normal practice. We've just been denormalised over the course of the last few years. And frankly, a very clear majority of the British electorate have had enough. And if this is not dealt with, it begins to break down the social contract that exists between the governors and the governed. It begins to destroy confidence that democracy actually ever changes anything when both parties give you the same thing. And I think there is a genuine threat to public order if these fears are not assuaged. And I think what we're doing actually is a positive contribution to this debate. And I can see already from yesterday, we've shifted the centre of gravity of the national debate on this issue.
You talked yesterday about it being an invasion of the UK. Is that the sort of language you use to describe Glasgow?
Well, I used the word invasion in 2020. I said, if we don't do something, there will be an invasion. And I was laughed at. Well, I'm used to that, of course. But, and 180,000 people later, you can choose whatever word you choose to use. 4,000 people in Glasgow, you can choose whatever word you choose to use. Right, moving on, we're going to go to David Walker from the Scottish Daily Express.
Hi, Nigel. A couple of things. On immigration, do you believe there's a different attitude towards immigration in Scotland compared to England, and do you think it's changing, and why? On the second point, you said that you're going to fix the mess the SNP made in Scotland, but a vote for reform, Splits Unionist vote, would bring the SNP back into power. So how are you going to fix the SNP's mess? And you said you're going to be in a powerful position next year at Holyrood. How? Define powerful position.
Okay. Look, it's very interesting. You know, if you look at the social attitudes survey, for argument's sake, Scotland is not very different to England when it comes to the immigration issue, and especially when it comes to the illegal immigration issue. Attitudes are not dissimilar, north and south of the border, despite the fact, Scotland has not suffered from the population explosion that has happened in many, many parts of England. So that particular pressure you've not seen. So is the level of concern as high as England? No. But is it comparable on social attitudes? Yes. The main reason there's not been a big debate around this is because just no party in the Scottish mainstream has chosen to debate it. They've just found it too awkward and thought they'd rather brush the whole thing under the carpet. As for what we can achieve next year, look, we are, I repeat the phrase, we are a work in progress. What would a powerful position be after the May elections next year? It would be in a position, it would be in a position where we were strong enough to get rid of an SNP government. Well, let's see how the scores on the doors work. Well, I mean, Mr. Sawa and I don't necessarily get on that well, but it's remarkable after elections what mathematics can do. Let's see. And anyway, why would Labour beat us next May? We're going to beat them, so there you go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think at this point we shouldn't be talking about who's going to do deals with who. And I can tell you now, if I'm at the table talking to anyone, I won't be giving a running commentary next year on what is going on. But my position is, and Reform's position is, here in Scotland, is we need to get rid of the SNP. Yeah. And by voting Reform in great numbers, you've got a greater chance of doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Gordon, Scottish Daily Mail.
Thank you, Mr Farage. After your event yesterday, Elon Musk took to social media to criticise you. He said, Farage is weak sauce who will do nothing. What's your response?
Yeah, well, actually, Elon Musk took to social media to praise my speech, to say, go, Nigel, go. And within a few hours, he changed his mind. He was busy launching a rocket yesterday, which I'm pleased to say was a great success. And I do admire him in many ways, but his inconsistency is quite astonishing.
Talking of inconsistency, you denied you had a women problem, but when you were introducing Graham, you said he matters to us because he's our first MSP.
Yeah.
He's not your first MSP. Michelle Ballantyne was the Scottish leader of Reform for a year in the previous Parliament, but you seem to have forgotten all about her.
Well, I wasn't involved with Reform at the time. You're right, but I wasn't involved with Reform at the time.
Well, that doesn't say much for your respect for women that you've just forgotten about.
Oh, don't talk nonsense. I was actually busy doing other things. I wasn't in politics at the time. The party was run by someone else. I can give you chapter and verse of what's happened since the 3rd of June last year.
And we came onto this issue via Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah.
In her book, she also says you are odious, have a brittle, fragile ego, and are bombastic. Just for the record, to clarify, how odious, egotistical and bombastic do you think you are?
You make your own mind up. You can say whatever you like. And do you know what? I couldn't care less. Couldn't care less what she says or any of you say. I'm not interested. I'm far from brittle. I don't worry about any of it. I just do what I think's right. I came out of retirement this time last year to get back into politics because I thought I could make a positive difference. And there are a growing number of people who actually agree with that.
You do sound a bit touchy.
You can try as hard as you like, mate. Sorry. OK, moving on to John Boothman at the Times.
Nigel, yesterday there were reported figures about rape and attempted rape in Scotland, up 15% on last year. Yeah. Have you got a policy prescription for that? And secondly, can I ask Graham, you know, this is an absolute disaster, 3 Tories leaving the Tory group at Holyrood in 4 months. Are you expecting any more of your colleagues at Holyrood to come?
Well, on the stats, we look at Glasgow itself. Sexual assault hit a 10-year high, up 22%. Rape and attempted rape hit a 10-year high, up 32%. So these figures are, I would suggest, deeply disturbing. And I return to, I think, the important point that I made earlier. This is a cultural problem. You know, I'm not getting into religion or race or anything like that. This is a cultural problem. The fact is, in Afghanistan and countries like that, women are treated very, very badly indeed. And now this is beginning to hit our streets in this country. And, you know, it was interesting, wasn't it? I mean, who were the people that turned up at Epping at the Bell Hotel? It was women. You know, we've had a couple of women questions in the audience. It was women that turned up outside the Bell Hotel. It was mothers and grandmothers that turned up outside the Bell Hotel, simply saying, up with this, we will not put. So you know, we need to have a grown-up debate about this, a sensible debate about this, but there is a real problem.
But Nigel, a grown-up debate in a place like Glasgow would tell you that Glasgow has huge figures in domestic violence.
Yes.
It's probably white males that are the problem in Glasgow in terms of the numbers of rapes and attempted rapes. You haven't given us any policy.
Well, hang on a second.
For any of that.
Hang on a second. If we've got a huge problem with that issue in Glasgow anyway, why on earth would we add to it? Why on earth would we add to it? As for the solution, well, I gave the solution earlier to the other correspondent from the Scottish Sun. You know, under our policy, they won't be in Glasgow, and they certainly wouldn't be free to walk the streets. That is the policy solution to that particular problem.
Yeah, I don't know is the answer. I've not spoken to anyone. None of my former colleagues in the Conservatives knew what I was going to do today. None of them. So despite your best efforts, John, you're a great journalist who gets information out of folk. None of them knew anything. I think it'll be interesting now for me whether I have any private conversations. They will remain private if people want to come forward. As I said earlier, they'd be most welcome to come through my door wherever I'm put in Parliament.
Simon Johnson, Daily Telegraph.
What message do you think Mr Simpson's defection sends to right-wing voters who are considering whether to back the Conservatives or your party in the Holyrood election? And to Graham, the two other MSPs who have left the Tory group have done so because they think Russell Finlay has made the party too similar to Reform, and it's certainly difficult to put a fag paper in between the two parties on things like energy policy. So why is it that you have gone from the Conservatives to Reform? What's the difference for you?
I'm going to answer that first and you'll do it second because I can't resist this. Are you having a laugh? It's the same energy policy as the Conservatives. What, to make us the Saudi Arabia of wind? That was the Conservative policy during the last government. They've even put net zero into law. That was a Conservative government that did it. The fact that now they say, well, we didn't really mean it. Well, sorry, but you did. So frankly, they have a declining credibility on issues as a party and geographically. If you just look at the, I do think it was instructive. I did think it was instructive what happened in the Hamilton by-election because they actually had quite a strong candidate with a local following. And still they're back down at sort of on the edge of saving deposits. And in other elections we've seen around Scotland, by-elections around Scotland, the Conservative vote has fallen to derisory levels. And I think that next May, the Scottish Conservatives will do so badly in those Scottish elections that they will cease to be a political force in Scotland, and I think we may see the same result happening in Wales, parts of northern England and elsewhere. And it's very interesting because, you mentioned that some MSPs go in one direction and some go in another direction, and everyone says, oh, well, the Scottish, or the Scottish Conservative Party or the National Conservative Party, it's a broad church. Well, it is a broad church. The trouble is it has no religion. It doesn't actually have a faith that binds anything together. And I just get the feeling that, no, I genuinely believe that what will happen here next May for the Conservatives is pretty much a wipeout.
And I wrote a piece last year which none of you picked up on, but if you had, you'd have got some headlines out of it. A number of people in the Scottish Conservatives who didn't necessarily appreciate what it was to be a Conservative. So listen, Simon, I can send you the link if you want to read that and pick over it. I'm not here today, as I made clear, to criticise Russell Finlay or the Scottish Conservatives. I don't want to do that. It's Russell's problem now. I want this to be a positive thing, and I'm going to be working on policies very, very quickly, and you'll see a clear difference between us and others.
Excellent. Simeon Kerr, Financial Times.
Thanks very much. To go back to energy, I'm sure in Aberdeen you're probably going to get quite a lot of support for more drilling, but also given the declining nature of the North Sea basin, many people up there are also looking to renewables as the future, and given your policy of ending subsidies, that puts that under threat. So, I mean, how, and a further point, sorry, could you also address whether you would propose more fracking, and how do you think, would that get much support in this country? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the viability of large parts of the North Sea is determined by the price of oil, obviously, and whatever the expected price of oil is for any investor. There's still viability there, and given the state the world's in, it wouldn't be surprising if there weren't further energy shocks at some point over the course of the next few years. Should we be fracking? Well, you know what? Countries that frack get rich. Countries that don't frack get poor. And the problem with renewable energy is twofold. Number one, the national grid is not set up to deal with intermittent energy, which is why we have to pay to turn the turbines off when the wind's blowing effectively around all of our coastlines. We can have renewables, but we have to accept expensive energy for families and the continued deindustrialisation of Britain. And if renewables can work without subsidy in a genuine market, that's fine. But the truth is, and you know it, and I know it, they can't. That's been the case for a very, very long time. So if renewables can stand on their own 2 feet, fine. I don't believe they can, and I don't think, as I say, the grid is set up to deal with that form of energy.
The grid's being reinforced now, so by
the time of the next general election, there will be a better functioning grid. If we had carbon-free electricity, it would cost over $1 trillion, and maybe nearer 2, to upgrade the entirety of our grid, and that would guarantee the most expensive industrial energy prices in the world, which we have now, and it would guarantee it for the next 2 decades. And we would literally, and we are deindustrialising anyway. You know, we have the most, and I repeat the point, we have the most expensive energy industrial prices in the world. In America, a unit price, a unit cost of electricity for a manufacturer, for anybody in business, is 25% of what it is in the UK. And much of that has been because of their shale gas boom. And, you know, Ed Miliband will say, oh, it's all about global prices. Well, actually, with gas, it's not. We don't have a global set gas price in the same way that we do for oil. But it is, you know, you raise that question, and I think it is a very, very big, important economic debate. But I think it's also a very big, important strategic debate as well. Moving on to Louise Wilson from the Holyrood magazine.
Hi there. Since the general election last year, you've lost a couple of MPs, and then since the local elections in England in May, you've lost, I think, about a dozen councillors, half of those having resigned as councillors altogether. So, ahead of 2026, how do you expect Scots to look at that and have confidence in your candidates? And then I guess to Graham, if you are re-elected next year, is part of your job to try and keep the group together?
Well, we had to, I mean, you know, in short order, we had to fight the English county elections, which meant finding 1,630 candidates. And we did actually put in the field more candidates actually than the Labour and Conservative parties, which we were proud of. And we've, you know, did our professional vetting. We didn't have huge horror stories about nightmare candidates, things that had occurred in the general election in 2024. Frankly, I think there were people that said, we'll stand for you, just to make up the numbers, who just never wanted to be elected and suddenly realised what the responsibility was. As for the national level, well, sometimes things go wrong. You know, as one of those MPs that's left, I would never have had as a candidate had I been party leader, but I wasn't. You know, I inherited that and I've taken it on from there. By the way, I'm not knocking Richard Tice. He kept the party going. You know, he lent it £1 million of his own money just for it to survive during those years. But it was kind of a bit on care and maintenance. And what I said was, when I got elected, that I would democratise and professionalise the party, and that's the path that we're on. I've given it a constitution. We now, as of last week, have an elected board. You know, we are taking it. But the difference with Scotland is we don't need to find thousands of candidates. I think the maximum number of seats is 129, you know, and we've already got hundreds of people coming forwards. I'm pretty confident we can do that.
As regards to next year, there will obviously be, I think, a pretty healthy cohort of Reform MSPs. Hopefully I'll be one of them, but I've been around long enough in politics to know that it can sometimes be difficult to manage people. So one of the skills of leadership, and if I was in any kind of leadership role within that group, is to manage folk. So I think I'm pretty good at that. One of my main worries, as far as you're concerned, though, Louise, is the Holyrood Magazine Awards coming up, where I'm on the short list for 2 awards, and I hope there's not an emergency meeting of the awards committee now, should I have won any of those, to reconsider.
Very, very good. Paul Hutchian from a Daily Record.
Thank you. If you look at the opinion polls, Reform UK are doing much better in England than they are in Scotland. So I was just wondering, why do so many Scottish voters find you to be so repellent? And secondly, you've always been a Putin fanboy. Are you hopeful that Russia gets to hold on to the land that they illegally seized from Ukraine?
Yeah, it's a delightful tone of questioning. Thank you so much for coming along and making our morning. I think it's absolutely marvellous. I have absolutely condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Interestingly, you base that falsehood on one interview I gave in 2014 when I said I admired him as a political operator but didn't like him as a man. Just a few years before that, he was given a state visit to Buckingham Palace. He was welcomed by a Labour government. He was welcomed by the Queen. In fact, he met the Queen again just a few years later. So one comment taken hopelessly and completely out of context. Now, I'll repeat, for your benefit, that in 2014, in one interview, I said I admired him as a political operator, but not as a human being, that I didn't like him and I wouldn't like to live in Russia.
Is that why Scots find you so repellent?
Do you know what? I mean, that is so low grade, it's almost astonishing. We are doing remarkably well in Scotland. You know it, and that's possibly why you're so upset.
And I think if you look at the result in Hamilton, where we came a very, very good third, could have come second, a council by-election in Barrhead, where it was essentially a three-way split. If you look at the opinion polls, then you'll see that reform is not as you describe it, Paul, and I know you're a really nice guy. Nigel doesn't know that yet, but I'll reinforce that message.
I'll need some convincing,
later.
you know.
Well, no,
but
he genuinely.
But you know what?
Really is.
The one thing we do, Graham, the one thing we do, and I know you lot like it, is we are actually up and open for questions from anybody. So you know.
Yeah, but the polls are moving in one way, Paul. You know that, and I hope they'll continue to move in that direction.
Excellent. Then we are getting through this, I promise you. We've got Alistair Grant from the Scotsman.
Thanks very much. Other than on these big issues like net zero, immigration, we don't actually know anything about Reform UK's policies in Scotland. How would you go about turning around NHS waiting lists? How would you go about turning around Scotland's education system, which many people think is in the decline? And just a question for Graham, does that not trouble you that you're signing up to a party that doesn't have policies in place?
Well, that's the reason he's here. The reason he's here is to answer your questions. I'm not going to dictate from London what platform we should run on in terms of dealing with NHS problems in Scotland. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that to the Scottish Party to work out. And I genuinely think that a chap like this, with life experience and political experience, is far better qualified to answer that question than I am.
So Graham's going to write the manifesto for
I didn't
Scotland?
say that. I didn't say that. You know, I didn't say that. I said he'd be part of the team that would do it.
I think I'm sorry for my sort of rambling mini epic right at the start, but I think I was quite clear that I'm coming in to help shape the direction of reform, but it'll be a team effort, you know, and I'll be setting out very, very soon what I think the challenges are for the party and what some of the solutions are. So hopefully you won't be disappointed. If you are, you can come back to me. And actually, for any of you, most of you have my phone number. If you need to speak to me individually, please do so. If you want me to write anything for you, I'm happy to do that. But we're not at the point now of announcing a manifesto. That will be worked on, but it'll be a team effort.
We're a rapidly growing and a rapidly evolving political movement in Scotland, and today's part of that.
Just a very quick process question. Nigel, you obviously said that you won't be kind of effectively appearing in TV debates, leading the party in Scotland going into the
I will be
Holyrood
visiting
election.
Scotland. I'll be visiting Scotland on a regular basis. I said I would. I didn't visit Scotland much because I had the English elections to focus on. I'm going to be here a lot. It's the second time I've been here in a relatively short space of time. I'll be here a lot, but it's not for me to head up, debates amongst people who are competing to be in the Scottish Parliament.
Well, how will you go about choosing that leader in Scotland? Would that be a
Well, I've explained that already. We will have to go through our full candidate selections and listings, and it's at that point that the leading figure will be chosen. All right. OK, let's go to Libby Brooks from The Guardian. Just 3 more of that. I think that's right, yeah.
Thank you. This morning, political parties in Northern Ireland have condemned your plan to renegotiate the Good Friday Agreement, calling it irresponsible. Do you recognise their concerns? And what would you do if the Irish government and other parties in Northern Ireland refuse to renegotiate? And for Graham, you've been sort of talking about this challenge that you have now to develop a suite of policies. Can you tell us what your top 3 priorities will be?
The Northern Ireland situation is deeply complex, and I made great reference to that yesterday when I gave that speech and answered questions at Oxford Airport. And we understand that what Blair did was to write the ECHR into absolutely everything. It was sort of his way of making sure we were embedded into the European Union for eternity. So yes, there is tidying up to be done, and I did say yesterday very, very clearly we would not be starting with Northern Ireland. That is something, as history shows us, anything to do with Northern Irish or Irish politics often takes years and years to solve. So that will not be at the forefront of what we do.
And Libby, I wouldn't really like to give a top 3, but I think if you look at public services in general in Scotland, they've been failed by the SNP. I think I'll be talking about soon health, education, transport, housing, things like that. So it's not a top 3. I'll be looking at everything across the suite and working with colleagues within the party and people without the party. And I know from my very short time of being involved with reform is there is a lot of outside interest in speaking to this party.
Yeah, no, there is.
In Scotland.
There is. In fact, we've seen already today business interest coming. People want to meet us, want to talk to us, and want to talk about policy. Andy Phillip from the Press and Journal.
Over here. Graham, just you have Aberdeen roots, and I just wanted to take it back to energy, however short those roots were, I don't know. But is there room at all for a just transition into renewables in the North East for the economy there? Or would you advocate for a complete U-turn and a real focus on oil and gas? And the North East has demonstrated quite high polling for reform. Would you be tempted to go back and try your luck there?
Well, to be honest, Andy, it's really stretching it. I was born in Aberdeen. I was there for 18 months. So my memories of the city have come from later visits. So I wouldn't really describe myself as an Aberdonian. I couldn't. That would just be completely wrong. I spent probably the bulk of my life here and in Carlisle, where I went to school. But look, oil and gas, very big issue. I think you've seen with the closure of the Grangemouth refinery how that sector, and that is in the region that I represent at the moment, how the sector has been let down actually by both governments. It was a real frustration for me when I was in the Conservatives trying to get the UK government to engage with the Grangemouth issue. We actually tried. I'm not going to say which former colleague and I tried, but we did try to get, ministerial visits to Grangemouth when the owners were crying out for that kind of contact, and we just couldn't get it. So they've been let down. The sector's been let down by both governments.
Yeah, what is the form of non-intermittent energy with zero carbon emissions that the grid is beautifully built to design with? It's called nuclear, but we're just not capable of doing it. Why do I say that? South Korea without any concessions to safety or compliance, is able to do nuclear energy at 25% of the cost that we're able to. We're currently embarked on the Sizewell project. We're currently embarked on the Hinkley project. Sizewell was going to cost 20 billion, now it's 40 billion. And long term, I do think nuclear has to be our future, but we have to try and make it financially competitive. And the first thing I do, I think, is ring the South Korean Prime Minister and say, come and give us a hand.
Well, nuclear should be part of that basket. But as you all know, we can't have nuclear here in Scotland because the SNP has ruled it out under planning rules. One of the reasons we need to get them out of office.
But it's a worthy debate.
Yeah.
It's a worthy debate about long-term, sustainable, reliable, non-intermittent, zero-carbon emitting energy. The penultimate question is from Rebecca McCurdy from the Herald.
Thank you. You are clearly very delighted to have Graham Simpson in your ranks. However, I'd like to read a comment from a Tory source. Graham Simpson is a pathetic, nasty little man who won't be missed. Just last year, he had to apologise to a young female member of staff for acting totally inappropriately, bullying and intimidating ways towards her. The way he spoke to her was so bad that he was forced to sit down and say sorry in person. He'll be more trouble than he's worth for reform. Can I get both of your response to that?
Well, that's not our judgment by any means, and we don't take people on unless we've done some pretty extensive research and found out what nasty gossip there is about them, what good stories there are about them, and we are careful. We have to be. So, no, we are very, very happy that Graham has joined us. And look, you know, it's politics, and people chuck abuse around the place. I mean, it's not exactly uncommon. It's been going on for some time.
And actually, that's the kind of nastiness that I was alluding to earlier. Yeah. They've come out of the traps very sooner than I thought. Absolutely untrue. And anything internally will be dealt with internally, and that's the way I'll leave it. But, you know, I certainly don't have a problem with women.
Laura Pollock from The National is the last questioner of this press conference.
Hi there, thanks. You talked about bringing positivity back to politics after your coming out of retirement. Kill them all, keep Britain white, no black in the Union Jack. We're hearing this language more because of you, no?
No, you will hear less of it because of me. If I wasn't here, goodness knows where politics would have gone. There is no man alive in this country today who did more to destroy the BNP with their rise in 2006 to 2008 than me. If I hadn't been there, they would have reached much, much higher levels. I am the antidote to the far right, and as you know very, very well, I have always, whichever political parties I've led, and this one in particular, I've always said no to people who I genuinely think come at this from a nasty, hard right disposition. We are the antidote. And we are the genuine antidote to those things, and I say that with great passion.
And so those comments are made by members of Patriotic Alternative, and you're
nothing to do with it. Nice try, lovely try.
They're attempting to infiltrate the party for Holyrood 2026. So as you interview,
as hard as you like.
No, I'm just asking. As you interview candidates, have you got some sort of safety net to make sure these people don't infiltrate the party?
Yeah, do you know what? If they have links like that, you know, we check and we vet, and if we find they have got links like that and they've lied to us, they are out of the door before lunchtime. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Graham. We look forward to working with you and moving this party on towards the elections next May. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, of course. We need the chair. Yeah.